We're good.
Right, thanks.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. The time is 8:32 a.m. on October 16th, and we're reconvening the work session of the Board of Fisheries 2020. Yesterday, we got through the bulk of the agenda, but this morning we're on agenda item number 15, which is miscellaneous business. And I believe that on the website, for the work session meeting, RC 24 is the miscellaneous business agenda. And I just want to confirm that everybody has that in front of them and can follow along. Yeah? Nods?
I have it.
Okay, great.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Glenn, for putting this together. And I believe we'll start off with miscellaneous business agenda item number 1, which are the stocks of concern approval and action plans for Prince William Sound and Southeast Yakutat.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I just wanted to remind the board what the department is looking for is basically board concurrence or disagreement with our stock of concern recommendations and direction on action plans for the new stock of concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have also additional discussion as the department relayed in cycle at those meetings, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Board discussion.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would suggest we, move to basically approve or recommend that the department moves forward with both action plans.
Additional
We have
discussion.
the action plans in front of us to look at.
Sam?
So,
Yeah.
Doug, I dropped off there because my computer rebooted for some reason. Which 2 action plans are we talking about?
Yeah, we'll draft the action plans following your concurrence on stock of concern recommendations.
So the action plans will be further discussed and available in front of us at the in-cycle meeting.
Correct. We'd just like your direction on whether you concur with our recommendation or not. And if so, then we will draft action plans. And if you can give us guidance on action plans, if there's any guidance you want to provide to us, now's the time. Thank you.
Yeah, I do concur with basically the stock of concern of those. As far as the details of the action plans, I wouldn't have any, it'd be better to work with kind of stakeholders that, at or before the meetings and kind of hammer them out. But I assume the department's going to start drafting them and have some ideas, and then we can probably hash it out at the meetings on adoption of what they actually are. I believe that's how we did it in Southeast last year.
Yeah, I think that's the normal process. I only have, I know that we're having trouble with our king runs and the Taku and the Stikine down here in Southeast, but I'll be interested to see what the department comes up with an action plan. I have a couple questions that I'll ask in the future, but I just wanted the other board members to know what one of the concerns I have is where anything with Stikine and Taku rivers are totally a Canadian fish, and would be setting a precedent if we started managing for Canadian fish. But that's just one of my thoughts. But we'll look at the action plan when it gets here. I'm all for the department writing them up and putting them in front of us for the Prince William Sound meeting and the Southeast meeting. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Sam.
So one of the issues that we've got with the stock of concern recommendations is the northern inside pink salmon in Southeast. we've never designated a stock of concern with pink salmon because the species characteristics just don't fit well with that. And Mr. Steve Heinel's online here if there are questions about that. So we've had concerns about pink salmon stocks in the past. The board has never decided to call them a stock of concern for many reasons, mostly related to the biology of the species. Thank you, ma'am.
So, Madam Chair, this is Doug. In addition to my duties as Commissioner of Fish and Game, I'm also the U.S. Salmon Commissioner for the Pacific Salmon Treaty. So I shared John's concerns a little bit with respect to action plans going into regulations that may end up putting into regulations things like escapement goals and other things that are bilaterally agreed to under the treaty. That said, I think we will prepare for you, given the concern that we haven't met those escapements in the Takus and Stikine for years, and there's allocative implications associated with how we would manage the U.S. fisheries to get those escapements that we have treaty commitments to do. What our management approach would be, we'll get that to you in terms of an action plan. However, I probably will caution you to not put certain things into regulations that are covered under international treaties. But I think it is fair for you to understand how we're managing to meet our treaty obligations in those rivers.
Madam Chair, I got a quick question for the commissioner. So are the Canadians using severe restrictions like we're already using in the Southeast for the Taku and Stikine? Are they actually managing their fish for like we would do for a stock of concern? Is that in there something that
missed what you said because I think my connection is stable. But in essence, I think what you're going to see in our in our action plan is very similar to how we're managing the fisheries right now, because we're not meeting our escapement objectives that are bilaterally agreed upon. But I think given that how we're managing has potential allocative implications, I think it's fair to get the board's assessment and blessing onto the approach we're currently using. Again, I get nervous putting it into regulation because, you know, we could bilaterally agree to a change to an escapement goal, and for instance, establishing an OEG or something else, that would be meaningless from the board's perspective because we still have our treaty obligations to meet.
Yeah, probably my greatest concern would be Alaskans doing, you know, not Canadians not sharing in the burden of protecting these fish. That's my biggest concern. So I guess we'll just wait and see what happens when we get to the meeting. I'm all for the department drafting up action plans for this and then working it out at the Prince William Sound and Southeast meeting. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah. Well, when they stop sharing the burden of conservation, we'll have a good stare down across the table at the next treaty meeting.
Yeah, I understand.
Hey, Madam Chair, I'd like to go back to Director Raybon there and trying to read between the lines here and have a question for him back on pink salmon.
Mr. Payton.
So the department, looking through the, you know, stock of concern memo on it and what you just said, the department it's technically meeting the stock of concern criteria.
Right.
But in the past, the department hasn't listed it just because the life cycles, and you kind of sounds like the board should discuss this a little more maybe before we just decide to do it on the pink salmon. Would that be a recommendation from you?
Through the chair, Mr. Payton, that would be my recommendation. The memo kind of spells it out, how it's not really a good fit for a normal stock of concern. And if you want more details on the actual moving parts of those poor fits, I guess is a better way of putting it. Steve Heinel is standing by to expand on that if you want to take up the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I'm comfortable with excluding it from the recommendations or having the board not recommend it. I'm comfortable that pink salmon will come back down there at some point. they are everywhere else. So I'm not too awful worried about it, and tend to agree with the department on it and about their life cycle, and just they don't fit that standard life cycle of the other salmon. So I would recommend excluding that as a stock of concern.
Madam Chair, before, just to carry on the conversation just a little bit further, I'd like to ask Mr. Raybung a question, and the question would be, if I remember right, this last season, the north end, the stocks you're concerned about, fishing was very, very limited. So you were already basically using a kind of an action plan to try to get this run to come back up. Am I right there, Mr. Raybun?
Through the chair, Member Jensen. Yeah, that's correct. We're going to always manage to meet escapement goals. And if we're not meeting escapement goals, we're going to take management actions being much more conservative, restrictive. There are very few openings in the northern inside area this year. Very limited commercial harvest, trying to meet those escapement goals. And again, the goals are indexes. So obviously there are some streams that probably made their spawning objectives or needs, and many others that didn't. So it's a portfolio, and we manage it by an index. And yes, we do take management actions if we're not achieving our goals. Thank you.
And a quick follow-up, but this year was a pretty unusual year because of the what is it, 60, 70-year rain event we had here. It was probably really hard to count fish in streams and do your regular surveys. Do you think you had a good look at what was up the stream, and at least the indicator streams, Mr. Director?
Through the chair, Member Jensen, I trust that our managers did as well as they could, given the circumstances, just like every year. All the conditions are different every year, every time you fly. And again, like you said, this year, the weather conditions were challenging. There were many challenges this year. Weather was one of them. Last year, for example, the opposite. It was a drought year.
Yeah.
And so there's environmental effects that are transient that affect these stocks. And again, pink salmon are kind of a boom and bust species, 1 year cycle. So anyway.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Mitchell.
Steve, would you mind elaborating a little bit and just providing a little information on the pink salmon down in that area?
Through the chair, Board Member Mitchell, I could do that. Basically, I was just going to expand on the stock of concern presentation that Jim Hasbrook presented yesterday. He talked about pink salmon to some degree, but in terms of their biology and their life cycle, first, pink salmon are prolific. They're present in just about every stream in Southeast Alaska that a pink salmon can get into and spawn. And I mean, they're in every single stream and rivulet in Southeast Alaska. So they're abundant. Their population structure is very shallow. Pink salmon populations are not nearly as genetically well-defined as, say, other species of salmon like sockeye salmon. We can identify sockeye salmon down to the lake of origin and mixed stock fisheries analysis with a high degree of precision. But in the current state of knowledge, we can't identify northern Southeast pink salmon from southern Southeast pink salmon. We have to expand to much broader geographic scales, to comparing Southeast Alaska pink salmon to Kodiak pink salmon. So they're all very closely related as well. And then again, unlike other species of salmon, pink salmon have a 2-year life cycle. They all return at the same age. This makes survival rates substantially more variable than exhibited by other species that's, like Bill Templin said yesterday, they spread their risk over multiple age classes. So pink salmon spawn, all of their progeny go to sea. They experience the exact same marine environmental conditions. They all return as adults 1 year later. And as a result, short-term changes in the marine environment can have dramatic effects on survival rates. all of these things, their short life history, their prolific nature and high abundance, their dramatic response to changes in the marine environment are all reflected in the tremendous fluctuations in abundance that we see. And, you know, this tremendous variation requires flexible management. When abundance is poor, as has been pointed out earlier here, the department's response has been simply to not fish. And I would point out figure 11 in the Southeast Stock of Concern memo in RC3. It's the last figure on the last page of the memo, and it shows the annual pink salmon harvest in the northern Southeast subregion since 1960. The chart shows very clearly how much smaller harvests have been in recent years of poor abundance. Some of the smallest harvests we've seen in the entire time series because we simply didn't conduct large-scale purse seine fisheries directed at harvesting pink salmon in those years. You know, we can control the harvest and we can reduce harvest of pink salmon when there's poor abundance. Conversely, the department needs to be able to provide harvest opportunity when it presents itself. And again, we're talking about dramatic changes in abundance that take place from year to year. And so when abundance is sufficient to conduct fisheries and ensure escapement goals are met, the department needs to be able to do that, to provide that harvest opportunity. Thank you.
I have another comment, Madam Chair.
Jensen.
Yeah, I sort of tend to go along with what Israel had to say there. You look at the figure 11 and it shows what pinks do. We've had some phenomenal runs in the last 10 years, but when you look back to statehood and in the 70s, it basically non-existent, and they did rebound. If you have given the right circumstances, these fish rebound and come back in orders of magnitude. So I just soon let the department manage the way they did this year and take the opportunity to harvest if there is something to harvest, and not if there's nothing. So I'll sort of go along with what Mr. Payton had to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Additional discussion. So we've been talking primarily about the Southeast recommendations, stock of concern recommendations, and I agree as well. I'm comfortable moving forward with the Chinook, well, the other stocks of concern, but excluding the pink for the reasons that we've already discussed. So with respect to the Southeast Yakutat stock of concern direction, recommendations that the department has made, recognizing that we're going to have a more robust discussion at the meeting in Ketchikan, hopefully. I would entertain a motion to approve the department's recommendations for stocks of concern for Southeast Yakutat.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Raybon.
to be clear, are you including the pinks in that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So to exclude the pink salmon from the recommendation. So I didn't hear unanimous consent. So I'll ask Mr. Haight to call the roll, please.
Madam Chair, now we're just on Southeast, or did this include Prince
We're
William
just
Sound?
doing Southeast. We haven't had a
Right.
discussion about Prince William Sound.
Okay,
let's
thank you.
do them separately.
Super. So this is a motion to ask for action plans for Southeast for all recommendations save for pink salmon. Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mr. Godfrey,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Carlson Van Dort,
Yes.
Mr. Payton,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
and that carries 7-0, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Shifting gears slightly to discussing the Prince William Sound stock of concern recommendations. Is there any board discussion on that front? Or Sam, would you like to offer any comments, leading comments? No?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there are no stock of concern recommendations for Prince William Sound.
Okay, are we just looking at escapement goal recommendations in here? Sorry.
Let me see. No, I don't think there are any chairs. It's just stock of concerns.
Yeah. You're confusing me.
I'm confusing myself. I apologize.
So I thought that we have a memorandum in front of us for Prince William Sound Management Area stock of concern recommendations.
Correct. And the only species that was examined, the only stock that was examined there was the Northern District chum salmon, and we recommend no stock of concern be established for that stock.
Okay, there we go. I got you. So given that, I don't, is there board discussion on that front, given the department's recommendation, or are there board discussion on the Northern District chum salmon?
I have none, Madam Chair. I agree with the department's assessment.
Okay. Just wanted to give the opportunity to have that discussion. I don't believe there's any action necessary at this point.
No.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay, moving on. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Avon.
So we did have recommendations for changes in escapement goals in Prince William Sound, but I didn't see that on the miscellaneous business agenda. I'm not certain that that requires board approval or not.
Nope.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that's your recommendations, and then they are what they are until the board decides a different goal is appropriate at a board meeting.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So moving on, the miscellaneous agenda items, number 2, the Division of Sport Fish request to use Rotenone. I'm assuming Mr. Rutz, you're going to speak to this.
Madam Chair, I can start if that helps a little bit.
Okay.
Background, and then
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Rutz may want to follow. It's pretty simple. In statute, there's section 1635-200, which you'll see in the RC, that RC8 that Division of Sport Fish cites. It's very simple. I'll read it. A department, other state agency, or person may not use poison to kill predatory animals without first obtaining the written consent of the appropriate board. So Division of Sport Fish has a robust pike eradication program, and so when they're going to move on to a different water body, they need to seek your approval. So that's what they're doing here. If it's approved, then you simply write them a note, or excuse me, a letter indicating approval. And so that's the process behind that. We also have Tom Vanya here who's here to help guide you through that.
This is Dave Rutz. Sorry, I have a problem negotiating 3 screens at once. My arrow never seems to be on the right screen when I'm trying to reply. Cashwitna Pond it's a very small pond on probably about mile 84, 85 of the Parks Highway. It's adjacent to a lot of freshwater lake systems that are in real close proximity. And the sooner that like I said, it's a very small pond. Treatment should be just super easy. And this needs to be done because it would be so easy for people to catch pike out of this little pond and transfer them to other systems. And we just finished a Rotenone project on Anderson and Kings Lake. And so we've cleared those lakes of pike. And so in essence, we really need to get this done, and we need to get it done this year.
Questions?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Dave, is this a pretty much self-contained system?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, I'm Tom Vanya with Division of Sport Fish Regional Supervisor. I can add a little bit to what Dave presented to you. Share my screen here real quick. So here you can see where the lake is. The large lake is Cashwitna Lake. Just above it in this small section here, it's really an unnamed lake, but it's kind of been known as Cashwitna Pit. So if I zoom out a little bit, you can see relative to where the location is from Willow. It's north of Willow about 8 miles. You can also see Cashwitna Lake is currently free of pike, and it flows into Little Willow Creek right here. And so because of the proximity of the pit to Cashwitna Lake and the proximity to the road, it would be real easy for people to start moving pike. So a lot of our programs are designed to prevent the spread of pike. And so this one here, it's only about 4 surface acres. It would take probably about 6 gallons of rotenone, and it'll take just a small crew about an hour to complete that treatment of that particular pond there. Also, to touch base on what Dave had indicated, us finishing up a project that you gave us permission in February at the Upper Cook Inlet Board meeting to clean out Anderson and Kings Lake that's in the Matsu Valley. And so this is a photo that was taken just a couple days ago. They actually eradicated over 12,000 pike in Anderson Lake. It was a monoculture. There was literally nothing else in there, not even sticklebacks. Kings Lake, which is adjacent to Anderson Lake, had fewer pike, probably about 100 pike. They had some suckers that were in there, and they did have stickleback in there. But you can see by this picture, all the pike that they killed with this monocultured lake were all very small pike, very young, hammer handles. They're kind of eating themselves out of a house and home. So we just finished that, and that was thanks to your consent to clean up that lake, which was connected to Cottonwood Creek drainage. And so we're keeping that drainage clean and from pike spreading into further systems that are there. And so we're looking at looking for your consent to do this small pond. We have a team that's kind of developed a rapid response. This particular one doesn't require a large NEPA process. There's no federal nexus. We've already been permitted by DEC's general permit for rotenone use. And in addition, the Department of Natural Resource Land Use Permit and Alaska Pollutant Discharge Elimination Permit, those should be forthcoming. And so as these pop up, part of the process is to get consent from the board. And we do have a consent letter that's easily for you guys to sign if you provide us consent to move forward. So with that, I can take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. A couple of questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Rutz.
can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
I just want to give you, the board members, an idea of how easy it is to transport pike and put them somewhere else. During the colder seasons of the year, pike will live up to 4 or 5 hours completely out of water. All you need to do is wrap them in a wet towel and you could transport them just about anywhere in the state. So it's pretty urgent that, we get this done, particularly this year. Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I'm assuming that, obviously it's a very discrete project. Are there other species of fish for the purposes of discussion in Cashwitna Pit?
Not in the pit itself, no. It's all we've been able to find in there is pike. And it was really kind of discovered by rumors that we heard that pike were there while the invasive species crew were out doing monitoring projects during the summer. So they confirmed that, yes, there are pike in there. That's about the only thing that they could find in there so far.
Okay. And the APDES permits and the other state permits that are forthcoming all have a public process associated with them as well, right?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I just want to confirm a follow up on that question. The public process, do the adjoining landowners get notice that the chemicals being applied?
Through the chair, Board Member Wood, yes. We have a well-documented process of public notification, not only in the news, but we contact landowners, we send letters, we knock on doors, we contact everybody that is within the immediate area.
Thank you.
Additional board discussion.
Madam
Yeah,
Chair?
I'm fully in support of it, and I say send this, like he called it, a rapid response team, Pike SWAT team. Yeah, send them in, send Parker in. Make sure you get Chrissy out there on it.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I had the privilege to go out on the Alexander project this year, and yeah, trying to stay ahead of it. It's a tough job, but got to stay ahead of it.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Jensen.
A motion would state allow the Department of Fish and Game to road-known cache a pit.
How you doing?
Second, ask for unanimous consent.
Well, you're sitting out in the rainstorm.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the board has approved the use of road known and will get you a memo or a letter of approval to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Moving on, Board Member Mitchell had requested an update, a very brief update from the department on the 2020 Yukon salmon fishery season. And I believe that that has, is that an RC? I believe it is. But I would ask that the department provide that update briefly. I don't know, Ms. Mitchell, are there any comments you'd like to make to this?
No specific comments, just recognizing that there was a historically low run of chum salmon in the Yukon area and to bring that to the attention, and thanks to the department.
Thank you.
Oh.
So I'm scanning the RCs here just to see if there's anything else.
Oh, Madam Chair, there wasn't. We didn't RC anything. We did. I had forwarded around before the meeting some report information for the board that was off the department's website.
Okay, very good. I thought I saw something.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So who will be presenting from the department today? Is that Chuck?
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. How are you this morning?
We are well, thank you. I'm well. I can only speak for myself.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so this morning I'm going to give I don't necessarily know if it's brief, but a fairly detailed summary of the Yukon 2020 season. And just to caveat this, all the information is preliminary and the fall information is very preliminary since we're still pretty well actively managing some of those fisheries there, even though the run is primarily over or at the tail end for the fall season. So let me get started here. I'm going to start with the summer season for 2020, and then I'll work my way to the fall season, okay?
Very good, thanks.
You're welcome. So the summer season preseason outlook for 2020 was 144,000 to 220,000 Chinook salmon. A run of this size could be large enough to meet most escapement objectives, provide surplus for harvest, but that could vary. The Canadian origin salmon preseason outlook was for a run size of 59 to 99,000. The 2020 preseason outlook was for approximately 1.9 million summer chum salmon. In-season pilot station assessment, the cumulative passage estimate at pilot station was approximately 161,850 Chinook salmon. The 90% confidence interval around that estimate was 143,000 to 181,000. Most Chinook salmon entered the river in 4 pulses, consisting of approximately 28,000, 36,000, and 26,000 and 25,000 fish. The front end of the run had an unusually long and consistent flow of tricklers that lasted for approximately 2 weeks before the more distinctive first pulse arrived. The 2020 Chinook run appeared to have been about 4 days later than average at the midpoint at Pilot Station. The Canadian origin component of Chinook salmon estimated in season using genetic stock information at Pilot Station was approximately 77,000 fish with a confidence interval of 64,000 to 90,000 fish. Approximately 690,900 summer chum salmon were counted at Pilot Station with a confidence interval of about 650,000 to 730,000, which is below the historical median of 1.9 million fish for the project. Summer chum run was likely 4 days later than average based on the midpoint at Pilot Station sonar. So now I'm going to move into Eagle sonar, which is further upriver near the Canadian border, where we assess Canadian passage. Passage at the border was much lower than expected based on in-season abundance estimates of approximately 77,000 Canadian origin salmon. The preliminary cumulative passage estimate at Pilot sonar was 33,000 Chinook salmon. This is not considered an escapement estimate as it does not account for harvest in Eagle or in Canada. The passage at Eagle sonar is not enough to meet the lower end of the international management escapement goal of 42,500 to 55,000 Chinook salmon. So I'm going to discuss the Chinook spawning escapement from the assessment this summer. There are currently 6 goals in the U.S., 1 weir, 2 tower, and 3 aerial goals. East Fork Andreevsky and Salsha Tower did not operate in 2020. The Chena River was impacted by high waters, and counts are only partial estimates. While Anvik, West Fork Andreevsky, and Nulato were assessed via aerial surveys, they didn't meet their goals. Summer chum spawning escapement. The drainage-wide escapement goal appears to have been met with a preliminary spawning estimate of approximately 720,000 fish. 3 escapement goals exist for summer chum salmon. A drainage-wide goal of 500,000 to 1.2 million, and goals at East Fork, Andreevsky, and Anvik. And both those goals were not evaluated this year because those projects did not operate. Now I'm going to move into the subsistence fishing overview for the summer season. Based on the preseason forecast, managers expected to provide limited subsistence harvest opportunity for Chinook and liberal opportunity for summer chum salmon. The in-season management strategy continued to allow fishing on the early trickle of Chinook salmon that come in prior to the first pulse in all districts. This provides opportunity to target sheefish when only small numbers of Chinook salmon are in river. Based on run timing, after the first fish were expected to reach most districts, fishing schedules with reduced time and 6-inch or smaller mesh gill nets were announced. Yukon area fishermen reported this early fishing opportunity didn't result in good catches because of high water levels, debris, poor weather, or couldn't find good numbers of fish. And similar reports of fishing conditions persisted throughout the summer season. By mid-June, it appeared the first pulse of Chinook and summer chum runs were late, and fishing in most districts were closed or restrictive to selective gear types. The summer chum run often comes in concurrent with Chinook salmon, although the peak of that run is slightly later than Chinook. In 2020, the summer chum run was about a week late and gave managers concern about the run strength. The first pulse of Chinook, counted at Pilot, started June 23rd. Over the next 2 weeks, approximately 100,000 Chinook salmon were counted, and fishing was reopened in most districts on a reduced schedule with 6-inch mesh. Passage of summer chum also increased, with the first day accounts over 20,000 fish taking place around June 23rd. Summer chum salmon continued to enter the river during the first part of the fall season. However, on July 18th, the crossover date between summer and fall season, less than 700,000 summer chum had been counted at Pilot Station, which was well below the historical median. Management strategies used in 2020 were formulated from lessons learned during previous seasons and where similar actions were taken in 2018 and 19. With a drainage-wide Chinook salmon run estimated at about 160,000 fish and a Canadian origin run estimated around 77,000 fish, it was determined there should be a harvestable surplus of Chinook salmon available to provide most households with about half the harvest taken in 2019, which was approximately 48,000 Chinook and roughly 25,000 Canadian Chinook made up a portion of that 48,000. However, despite very conservative management and widespread reports of poor harvest, the early run passage counts at Eagle Sonar project started to indicate, similar to 2019, that fewer Canadian origin Chinook were going to make it to the border than predicted by Pilot Station Sonar Genetics. 2020 very preliminary harvest estimates of Chinook salmon are approximately 32,000 in total and about 19,000 Canadian origin fish. Historically, the midpoint of late Chinook salmon runs at Eagle Sonar is about July 28th. In 2020, Chinook salmon passage was only 16,300 fish on that date, which is well below average. Harvest opportunities for summer chum salmon were also quite limited due to the late and weak run, persistent high waters, and closures to protect Chinook salmon. Now I'm going to move into the summer commercial fishery assessment. Assessment of the first half of the summer chum run was below average. No commercial fishing periods occurred until late June because it was not clear how much harvestable surplus would be available. 3 commercial fishing periods with selective gear were open in districts 1 and 2 on June 27th. 3 periods with 6-inch gill nets were announced in District 1 during the first week of July. However, the final period was canceled due to low summer chum abundance, poor harvest in previous openings, and poor fishing conditions due to high water. This season, there was 1 processor purchasing chum salmon in Districts 1 and 2. For the 13th consecutive year, no commercial periods targeting Chinook salmon were allowed in the Yukon management area during the summer season. The use of gill nets in the summer chum commercial fishery was delayed until approximately 95% of the Chinook run had passed through District 1. Commercial fishermen were required to report any Chinook salmon caught but not sold on fish tickets, and a total of approximately 1,100 Chinook salmon were retained for personal use from July 3rd to July 8th. The cumulative summer chum commercial harvest for Districts 1 and 2 was a combined 13,900 fish. Also sold during the summer season were 4,800 pink salmon. The summer chum harvest was 96% below the 5-year average harvest of 388,000 fish and was the lowest since 2003. Now I'm going to move into the fall season, and this information is very preliminary as it's been actively managed, and postseason analysis will be completed later this year, usually in December. So the outlook for 2020 fall chum salmon was for a run size of less than 450,000 fish based on the relationship between summer chum salmon returns. The drainage-wide goal is 300,000 to 600,000 fall chum, and the IMEG is 70,000 to 104,000 fall chum salmon. The preliminary fall chum passage at Pilot Station was estimated to be 262,000 fish, with a confidence interval of 244,000 to 288,000 from July 19th to September 7th, and the historical median is 740,000. The Canadian fall chum component, based on genetic stock analysis at Pilot Station, was estimated to be approximately 45,400 fish. The estimated passage of fall chum salmon at Eagle Sonar was approximately 21,000 through October 6th, which is below the IMEG range of 70,000 to 104,000 fish. Canadian Porcupine River Fishing Branch Weir Passage was approximately 4,700 fall chum salmon, which is well below the goal of 22,000 to 49,000 fish. The estimated passage of coho salmon at Pilot Station was approximately 108,000 fish. However, coho will continue to enter the river well after pilot project operations have ended. The historical median, though, is approximately 150,000 fish. No commercial fishery and subsistence fisheries opened on the my apologies. There was no commercial fishery this year, and the subsistence fishery opened on the regulatory schedule in districts 1 through 4, and then went to a half schedule around August 10th when subsistence fishing was closed. So you guys have any questions on that? I mean, I know it was a lot to digest in a brief amount of time, but you know, I toned it down as best as I possibly could while capturing all the highlight points for everyone. So if you have any questions, feel free.
Madam Chair, if I might, Chuck, you threw out just so much data at me. I couldn't keep up with the numbers you were throwing. And I noticed you were reading from something. Could you supply that to us that has all this data in it?
Most of this was just my personal notes. I know that the summer season summary was provided to board members through Forest. And I believe we also provided a chum salmon flyer that explained it as well. But if folks don't mind, I could work on putting something together and cleaning this up a little bit and pass that along.
I would very much appreciate it. I'd received a call about maybe 3 weeks ago from a gentleman in Tanana that was talking about the 1 through 4 group subsistence being curtailed, and this kind of data would help me better understand and converse with him. So would appreciate it.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Abel.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I mean, while we're happy to provide information, this is out of cycle and in season still. And we typically don't discuss current year in season management at a work session unless it relates to an ACR. And so I just want to make it clear, we're not looking for a decision or action from the board on this. We're just providing an update as requested by board member Mitchell. I will also say that the documents that were forwarded are available on our website and on the listserv. They're sent out as they're developed. So this information is available to the public as it's finalized and published. And so we're happy to get that information out. But I just wanted to point out to maybe the newer board members that this is unusual to take up something out of cycle like this in a work session unless it is an ACR. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Doug, Commissioner. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the treaty implications again, like we have down in Southeast Alaska, we have here. We have a treaty obligation to pass fish into Canada. We do our best to manage downriver fisheries based on assessments at Pilot Station and Canadian origin genetics at that station in hopes of passing fish into Canada. But for some reason over the last 2 years, we've failed to pass sufficient fish to meet our Canadian objectives and meet our objectives at Eagle Station. So we don't know the reason for that. We understand we have a treaty obligation. We'll be talking to the Canadians about that, but we will be carefully evaluating our management approaches in the lower river to ensure that we're meeting our international obligations to pass fish through while trying to minimize the impact that our decision has on subsistence users in Alaska. So right now, we are actively engaged in that assessment, and next time the Yukon comes in front of you, we will have a more detailed presentation to present to you. But I want to assure you that we are looking at that question and taking it very seriously and figuring out what we can do within our existing management tools to not only meet subsistence needs, but to meet our international obligations.
Yeah, Madam Chair, a kind of question for Chuck, or maybe you can condense it down to a 60-second just overview. You know, it looked like on the lower end on Kings, we made the numbers at pilot station. It looked like the run came in kind of as projected, but the last couple of years, it seems like they're just not getting upriver. I know heat stroke wasn't, or a hot year, they had some, theories on that, but this year, or over harvest, but yeah, it sounds like no one really knows why they're not getting to the eagle sonar. But I was a little confused on the chums. It didn't look like the run didn't come in extremely low, but I thought on the summer chums, but then I thought you said you made the escapement goals that were in place anyway. So I was a little confused on that.
Yeah, through the chair, board member Payton, we did make the drainage wide preliminary. It appears that we made the drainage wide escapement goal for summer chum salmon this year. The two assessment projects that we have in river for summer chum with goals did not operate this year. So we won't be able to, evaluate whether or not we achieve those.
Thank you.
And I guess if I could add one last statement, right now we have a lot of tools in our toolbox that we can use to manage fisheries, and we'll do our best until this comes into cycle. And if we need additional tools, we won't hesitate to come back to the board to ask for them. But right now I'm convinced we have the necessary tools to be able to try to unravel this through the next time this comes in front of you as a board. So.
Thank you. Board recognizes that this isn't in cycle, but it is a status report of, and responsive to constituent concerns. And so I appreciate the department giving us a brief update. Thank you. All right. Any additional discussion or questions related to the Yukon salmon fishery?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Mitchell.
I just wanted to say thank you to the department as well for providing that information and follow what you were saying about addressing concerns from those constituents.
Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous agenda item number 4. This is the update on the legislative boards and commissions confirmation process. I'm going to turn to Mr. Peterson. I know this is of interest. We're in kind of an awkward and unusual position where 4 of our board members are unconfirmed. Don't know whether or not the legislature plans to, come into a special session for the purpose of confirmation. So with the board, I know I am very interested in what the potential implications are. So I will turn it over to you for your report. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as you indicated, if the legislature doesn't come into a special session, then the appointments will not be taken up by the legislature within the time frame that they are required to do so. And we could step back a little bit. I think this was originally flagged for the board at the September 3rd House Fisheries hearing, where legal services or legal explained that with the passage of HB 309, I believe it was, last March, the legislature gave themselves additional time to confirm or decline governor's appointees. And this is all appointees, to boards, to commissions, some department commissioners. And it gave, HB 309 gave the legislature until January 18th of 2021, or until 30 days after the disaster declaration expires. And that currently expires on November 15th of this year. So until December 15th. And it's whichever comes first. So obviously in this case, that would be December 15th, unless that disaster declaration were extended. And what all that means is, if the legislature doesn't act by December 15th, then the appointees to boards, commissions, and so forth, including, as you pointed out, 4 members of this board, would not be acted on. I've looked into this. I've verified the information that was presented by Ledge Legal. And the information that I have that I can pass on to the board at this point is that the AG is aware of it. and has presented, is considering options. Those options have been presented to the governor's office, and the AG is working with the governor's office on a resolution. Right now, that's really the extent of what I can say to the board. Certainly, it's an issue that's being actively worked on, and I fully recognize that that's not very satisfying. But unfortunately, that is the extent of the information that I have available to pass on right now.
Thank you. Questions for Aaron from board members?
Yeah, Mr. Peterson, I have a question. So did you say if they don't act on it, then the appointments become invalid? I didn't catch that.
Through the chair, Member Godfrey, the bill HB 309 says that appointments not acted upon would be considered declined. That is what HB 309 says.
And what are the implications for a declined appointment in terms of reappointments or what is the next step in the procedure? So let's say that the legislature doesn't convene a special session. They do not act by, I think you said it was the earlier, either 30 days after the declaration or by January 18th. So it's the earlier deadline, not the later?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's just say that doesn't occur. What does that mean in terms of reappointments? Can the governor reappoint the same people, or do they need to go out and find somebody else? I mean, we'll work with whatever we need to do, but I mean, this board has already done some work. We've gone through orientation, we've been getting members up to speed. We've begun the work of the year. So I'm just kind of curious what those what the potential implications are.
So, Madam Chair, that is one of the first things that I looked at when I started researching this for Member Wood, who initially brought it up. And I think at this point, all I can say is not entirely clear. I think there are potentially some conflicting viewpoints.
So this is Doug, Madam Chair. I think Aaron is articulating that there's a difference of opinion depending upon who you talk to regarding those very questions. And the governor's office is working to try to figure out what the legal pathway forward is on these questions. I know it's very unsatisfying for the 4 board members that are in this position, and I sympathize with the position you're in. However, I want to let you be rest assured that we are actively engaged in the governor's office and Department of Law to look for a solution and a pathway forward to answer the very questions that you're asking. But right now, we do not have those answers, but rest assured we're working on them as diligently as we can.
So to be clear, with 4 board members, if in fact worst case scenario happens, I imagine the legislature will get this figured out. I don't expect this to happen, but we lack quorum and the board cannot function or take any official action until the legislature and the governor's office resolve this, correct?
If 4 board members were to disappear on December 15th, you would not have a quorum to be able to act. You are correct.
Thanks.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wood.
unless I'm mistaken, the board does not have anything currently scheduled that would require board action prior to January 18th. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding. Our next meeting would not occur until March per our actions yesterday.
Yeah, that's my take as well. So I gather the legal advice that Mr. Peterson would give this board would be to take no action after December 18th until that thing is resolved one way or the other. Because if we take action and any of those 4 board members participates in it, it's subject to a legal challenge that they should not have participated in the action and be null and void. And I hope we don't have to ever arrange that, but the only circumstance as is presently scheduled would be something emergency happening between now and January 18th.
Right. I assume you're referring to the Prince William Sound finfish and shellfish meeting, and that's the one that was postponed through March. So, you know, I guess the very dim bright side of this is that COVID has pushed those meetings out and perhaps allowed the legislature a little additional time to act.
And Madam Chair, the other thing I might say is that you're not alone in this issue. This board is facing these challenges, but we got a couple of commissioners that are in the same boat, as well as many other boards and commissions across the state. So it's an issue that's front and center with the governor's office and Department of Law, and we hope to have it resolved. So.
This is Jared again. You know, to Mr. Wood's comments there, I don't believe there's any, I'll defer to Mr. Peterson on this, but I don't believe there would be any standing to challenge any actions taken while confirmation's pending. People on state boards take official actions all the time. It's the legislature gets around to it when they do, till that expires. I've served on a state board for 5 months before I was ever confirmed taking official action. And so I doubt that. I don't know, but there may be precedent for it. I'm not sure, but that would not be my concern given the history of state boards and confirmation in the last.
So, Madam Chair, to the point that both members Wood and Godfrey just made, prior to December 15th, there will be more direction given. So it won't just come and go and nothing will have been said. I mean, so as I said and the Commissioner said, I understand it's not a very satisfying answer. Unfortunately, it's the posture that we're in at the moment. But as soon as more information is available to make available to the board, I will do so.
Thank you. Any additional board discussion or questions from Mr. Peterson? Okey doke, moving on. This takes us to number 5, another review, another request, I think, to have this discussion, the review of board practices during ethics recusals. This references RC number 6, and Mr. Haight, I believe you're going to speak to this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll kick off and perhaps Mr. Peterson and members Godfrey and Wood would pitch in. With this RC6, as you referenced, what it mainly does is it provides guidance for what board members are to do at a board meeting when they've been recused from a proposal. There was some question about that last year. And so just running through the policy, the first part is pretty much out of the Ethics Act and is not prescriptive to what one would do at a board meeting. It's board member actions following an ethics recusal determination, where we start to get into what's expected of board members at certain points of the meeting. And I think the only thing that I would say that is changed here between past practices, which didn't really have a whole lot of definition, was that when we get into committee of the whole, if a board member is recused from participating in a proposal, he or she would remove themselves from the table. So that's really the change. Of course, they would leave the table during deliberations. It wouldn't be expected during staff reports or public testimony. However, you know, it speaks to refraining from engaging in a line of questioning that appears to be a violation of the act. So this is getting it down on paper. This is draft. We did have an opportunity to work with Mr. Peterson and members Woods and Godfrey in putting it together. I'd see if they have any questions about it, but it's up for board discussion and perhaps approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haight. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say the Ethics Act sets the floor, and any board is free to make policies that go beyond that or define the contours of what their board is going to do in compliance with the Act. This policy in some areas, well, primarily what it does is it sets the contours. It says when someone should remove themselves from the board table. It clarifies really more procedural aspects. Substantively, it complies with the Ethics Act and may go a little bit beyond the Ethics Act in some respects, but certainly it complies with the Act.
This is Jared. Just for the background for the rest of the board members, a couple of you are new, others would remember perhaps last year. Appreciate Aaron and Glenn taking the time and working on this. From my perspective, being new last year, I was surprised at the lack of guidance or protocols in place when it came to conflicts of board members. So essentially what I saw is when various board members, myself included, had a conflict of interest that was declared, we were freestyling it. and this is already very provocative board, to say the least, as everyone knows. And the last thing we need optically is to have people who feel their ox is being gored. Why is that person still at the table and he was conflicted, but that person was conflicted and they left the table and didn't participate in anything? And why has it never been this way in the past? I've gone to these for 15 years and never seen this. And certainly in Kodiak, I got an earful from everybody who could give me an earful. And so then it's, it becomes, people start coming up with conspiracies and they think there's a lack of transparency. But at the end of the day, if we would just have some level of consistency, irrespective of what board member and what cycle may have a conflict, we can eliminate some of that, speculation and conjecture and add to some predictability and consistency in the way that conflicted board members would behave moving forward, and just take out that gray area. Because there was an instance in Anchorage where 3 of us were conflicted and all 3 of us did something different, so that doesn't look good and it doesn't look very professional. So I appreciate Mr. Wood driving this forward and making it a priority. And I think it's just as simple as that at the end of the day. It's about transparency, consistency, and a protocol in place. To Aaron's point, it goes maybe above and beyond, but I don't think there's any harm in that. If any board members, objects, they can object to that and they can choose to deviate if they want to. But I think collectively, it's just best practices. And that's all I have to say on that.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Wood.
What my goal was to provide finality, and I thank Mr. Godfrey and Mr. Peterson for participating in the document. It's rather straightforward and plain. There's nothing there that really needs explaining, but if anybody does have a question, I'd be happy to try and answer it. And I'd just like to get this behind us so that in the event that it occurs again, which it will, we now have it in writing as to what's expected of the individual board members.
Additional board discussion. Is there any concerns with this approach? Yeah. Then I would entertain a motion to adopt this policy on board member actions at meetings when recused from participating on proposals. I'm guessing the number of the policy, do we have a number, Mr. Haight, specifically, or will it be assigned one?
Madam Chair, yes. Yeah, I've got, it's actually the next on the list is, I believe, 299. So it'll get that number. Other edits to this particular document would be changing the date and adding your name and the vote tally, Madam Chair.
So it would be 2020-299-FB.
Correct.
Are there any edits that the board would like to take up to this document?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jensen.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't had time to read through this and analyze it real closely. I haven't looked at it, so I don't have any suggestions for edits, but I'd suggest, unless we need to do it right now, I'd suggest waiting until, well, we wait, there might not be any board members left. Yeah, let's, we'll go ahead and vote on it. I haven't analyzed, I don't have any edits, so I'll just go on. Thank you.
And this is not set in stone either. This can always be amended if necessary.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And let's go ahead and call the roll on this, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is on a motion to accept board policy on board member actions at meetings when recused from participating proposals, which would be the new policy number 2020-299 FB. Member Jensen.
Yes.
Mr. Godfrey.
Yes.
Ms. Carlson Van Dort.
Yes.
Mr. Payton.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, I couldn't hear you.
I forgot my mute. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mitchell.
Yes.
That policy carries 7-0, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Haight. Agenda item number 6. Discussion on the special Naknek River Sport Commercial Services and Guide Fisheries. Now, this is a special committee. There were assignments made to it yesterday, and I know that this is of particular interest right now to Mr. Payton, so I would offer up any comments or opportunity for you to comment first, Mr. Payton, and then open it up to the board.
All right, thanks. I see Jason's online there, so Jason, feel free to kind of jump in maybe after what I say. So I'll give a brief, I guess, history to the board members that were on it, but the last Bristol Bay cycle, and I'm referring to our charge statement. It's on our policy page. It's 2018, let's see, 293-FB. But basically what it says is at the meeting out there, we heard a lot of contention complaints from guides, locals, the ACs, and about the Naknek River, and specifically a certain area in a certain time. The Naknek River has some of the biggest, if not the biggest, rainbow trout in the state of Alaska, if not the world. And it's a highly competitive fishery, and some people, yeah, there's some conflict on the river. So the board turned down a lot of proposals. There was probably at least a half a dozen proposals to do something, and many were out of the board's hands that would, like rod limits and limiting basically commercial use of some type. But the board did acknowledge that a lot of people were concerned about it, and so did the Fish and Game, and the board committed to create this committee, and I believe the Fish and Game committed to a 3-year kind of creel, some type of study survey out there, and Jason can speak to it better. So that is, I believe, in its 2nd year. This fall, I just got back from King Salmon. I was out there for 2 days, right before the board meeting. I missed the peak. I was on a personal trip. I missed the peak fishing time. Everyone said the river wasn't that busy, but there was certainly a lot of boats on it. Had a good time, met with quite a few stakeholders and lodge owners. And there's a lot of contention and hurt in the community too over this issue. So I reaffirmed to them that the board is going to take it seriously and keep this committee going. And I have some thoughts moving forward, but maybe Jason can jump in here now and talk about what they've been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Mr. Dye?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, Mr. Payton. Yeah, as Mr. Payton stated, we did, in response to all the kind of controversy over effort levels and potential biological issues, we started a creel survey in 2019. We did a creel survey of the fall rainbow trout fishery, and we continued to do that in 2020. Of course, 2020 was a little different with COVID and everything, so we didn't necessarily get, it wasn't necessarily representative of an average year, but that crew for 2020 just came off the river about 6 days ago, so we're still working up the data on that, but we, during those surveys, we collected effort information, size composition of the catch rate or CPUE information in the sport fishery, and some demographic information, basically the types of anglers that are out there utilizing the fishery right now. As I said, we're working up the data now, and we should have a pretty good picture of what's going on and some kind of comparative data, comparing this with historical data here. Probably by late November, we should have that all worked up. And then we're hoping to have a report out this spring on it. But the data will be available, I would say, by late November, possibly sooner. It's going to kind of depend on people's schedules, but we're working on that now.
All right. I had a question for you, Jason. So I know this is your second year, and this COVID year might have been a little different. Are you doing next year? Because it seems like a 3-year data set would be really good. And I know it's right before the board meeting, so you'd have to kind of cram to get that 3rd year in there. But I guess that'd be my question to you. Are you doing 1 more year of it?
Madam Chair, Mr. Payton, our schedule or our project load for next year isn't set yet. That's definitely in discussion. Our initial plan was to do 1 year, and then we expanded that out to a 2nd year. And of course, with COVID, that kind of changed the 2nd year, although I think we did get good size composition information. Of course, the effort information is not necessarily applicable. And so we're kind of discussing what we're going to do for a 3rd year right now. That certainly is still, kind of on the list. But our schedule for next year is going to be, there's a lot of things, budget wise and stuff going on, and prioritizing things we're still working on.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to relay to the department how, concerned, stakeholders are out there. And, I went out there with an area biologist too, and we explained to him too that, they're in the central region, and, in times of budget, they're sharing it with a large area and a big road system, that they're in a bubble out there, which I understand. But yeah, I have some thoughts moving forward on that, and we can discuss that later through the subcommittee. But my thoughts would be to get the subcommittee members out there on the water next year, meet with the stakeholders, do a little town hall before, and then before the Bristol Bay meeting sometime in September or October. But I know the charge statement was that the board would potentially come up with a proposal or something as well. But I know the timing, the deadline is in April, so next year. So we'd be going out there after the proposal deadline. So I've been working with stakeholders out there and just suggesting they kind of try to powwow, but it happens pretty fast to get things in before the deadline. So that would be my interest, trying to get a trip out there with the subcommittee and talk to stakeholders.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily see this committee as an option for me to sign up on, but I guess I have a question. What are the goals of the committee here? And I would certainly be interested in this, knowing that I spent the majority of my life in King Salmon.
Well, I'll try to answer the goal of the committee is kind of in the charge statements, pretty vague, but yeah. It basically says, the board will look into and review the subject and come up with a determination or finding and potentially, a proposal is what the charge statement says. So, you ask 10 different people out there and they'll come up with what maybe something different, but basically we told them we'd look into it and try to find a solution to some of the issues that they bring up. To me, it might be as simple as facilitating some agreement between stakeholders. And I talked about a youth fishery out there, a day on the water for youth. That seemed like something they could all get around. So my thoughts on the intent of the basically subcommittee is try to facilitate some agreement between stakeholders.
Thank you. I'm well aware of the issues, so I just wanted to hear what the goal was in regard to the community itself.
So Madam Chair, this is Doug. Israel got my attention there when he was talking about trips to Bristol Bay to convene groups and a variety of other things. These are challenging budget times, and I understand the desire to go out and meet with local user groups in Bristol Bay, but that becomes an expensive proposition to form committees that are going out to certain areas that in addition to what's currently being done to work with ACs and a variety of other things. So, you know, to the extent that we can do more of these by Zoom calls and other things to get that public input is good, but you know, trips to Bristol Bay and a variety of other things are expensive propositions when you start flying people out there. So I just want to throw the budget flag up there a little bit as you move forward.
Noted, Commissioner.
Madam Chair, I just have just one thought on this, and I'll work with Mr. Payton on steps going forward. But this is not unlike what we had several years ago. The Kuskokwim subsistence salmon panel was put together by the board, and there was outreach to stakeholders, and they were trying to solve some problems, and they were able to come back in cycle. The board was and put together a number of solutions that seemed to work for folks. So regardless of the timing of when you want to hold a meeting, it will lead right into the Bristol Bay cycle. So I think the timing's good. And if I'm sure they'll be putting proposals in, and the board could always use those as vehicles at Bristol Bay. And it is in cycle. So a board generated proposal at a work session would still be, in cycle. So it would not be as controversial as most proposals like that. But just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Appreciate that, those updates and thoughts. Moving on the agenda to agenda item number 7, update on the advisory committee meetings. Now, I'm interested in hearing this update. I know that we received a few public comments, and there was concern about how the advisory committee meetings were advisory committees were meeting or not meeting, as the case may be, and how the department is proposing to hopefully facilitate getting those important groups together. I know that there's concern about that. So I will turn that over to Director Haight, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate you adding this topic to the miscellaneous business agenda. As you all know, we've got 80+ advisory committees, and they have really, as we approach the fall, been active in wanting to get together and meet. Of course, the question is, can they meet in person? And so we've had our regional coordinators back on recently, working hard on these questions, and we're not ready to go to in-person meetings quite yet. It's different than a board meeting, an AC meeting. There's different conditions, and all of these groups function different ways. So we're encouraging people, AC members, to look at that and think about it and what it would take to have in-person meetings. But in the meantime, staff was busy putting together best practices and a guide for doing these meetings through Zoom and through video conference. I would say the challenging aspect of ACs is the need to hold elections, and doing so on teleconference is difficult. Can be done in some instances, but it is sometimes hard to manage. And so we've been looking at that. Also, how to do elections on a Zoom platform, and so the staff has done a great job putting together methods for that. So we're working on that. We provided in those best practices, hopefully flexibility for our regional coordinators to work with individual chairs on what works best for their committee and their situation. Happy to report that the Fairbanks Advisory Committee, I think 2 nights ago, held a meeting on the Zoom platform, and apparently it went pretty well. So that was encouraging, and I just want to let you know that we're working on it. It's not perfect. People are concerned about it, but trying to address their concerns. And kudos to the ACs. They are active and they're ready to engage.
Thank you. Is the department putting out any type of guidance for these ACs, or are you just working with them on an individual basis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we put together a best practices sheet, and it provides how-to if you're doing Zoom meetings or teleconferences and ways to work through the meeting itself. We've branched off and did a more detailed how-to on elections, which are complicated, and so we have that out to the ACs. That was sent out I think Monday, and again, probably part of it is that really we're encouraging the chairs to work with the regional coordinators to figure out what works best for their AC. Chairs have been very sensitive to concerns that all the members have. Some members absolutely want to meet in person, and some members absolutely won't. And so these chairs are having to balance those different interests, and appreciate their help in this.
Thank you. Any board questions related to AC? Nope. Well, I appreciate the difficulties. You know, every AC kind of operates a little bit differently. Some have been conducting business by teleconference for a long time. You know, there's a variety of challenges related to internet availability and whatnot. And certainly, personally, I find meeting in person a lot more productive, but I understand the constraints, and I appreciate the work of the department to try and help facilitate a path forward for these ACs to get their very important work done, because we really value the input of the ACs. It's a really important part of the board's process. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
The last two items on the agenda, 8 and 9, were discussed a bit, and also discussed a bit yesterday, and then also discussed in our September meeting. These are brought forward by Member Wood, or conceptually brought forward by Member Wood, about forming 2 special committees, one to sort of review board process, and one to develop some sort of resolution or recommendations related to research needs and funding. So there were 2 charge statements that were drafted yesterday afternoon. They are RC'd and are on the website. I don't know if members have had an opportunity to read them yet. And if not, I'd be happy to take a break for 15 or 20 minutes to allow people the time to
Mart, I think you froze.
Either that, she has a good poker face.
What I might recommend is if the Vice Chair Jensen is okay with it, if we'd go ahead and take that break, maybe come back at 10:20.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Sounds good.
Okay, we'll get
Real
Mark
quick,
back on.
what item did you say it is? What is it under?
It is it's record copies 22 and 23.
22 and 23. Thank you.
On the website. So thank you. It's okay, Mr. Vice Chair, back at 10:20?
10:20.
Okay. Thank you.
Ready.
Thank you. Madam
Great.
Chair.
Thank you. Well, it is 10:21. We're back on the record, and it seems to be that the universe was telling me that we needed to take some time to pause and read the charge documents, because right as I was speaking, my power went out. So I'm glad that that kind of worked out well for everybody. So hopefully board members had a chance to sort of take a look at those documents, those draft documents, and review them. And I would like to take them up one at a time for discussion, in terms of whether or not we choose to establish these special committees, first of all, and then secondly, how we will make committee assignments. So I'd, do this sort of collaboratively would be my preference. So let's start with, I guess we have the charge document or charge statement for the proposed special committee on board process, which is RC 22.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jensen.
Yeah, I think this would be a good committee. Any way to create the efficiency of the board process and make it work better is always should always be looked at. It's a worthy committee to sit down and take a look at things and go through it step by step. We kind of do it all the time, but having a specific committee to really sit down and zero in on the fine points would be, probably be interesting to see what the committee would come up with. So I'd be in support of a committee like this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree with Mr. Jensen on it. I think it's good for us we're a very dynamic board, and if we need to adapt moving forward, just take a look at it, and even if this special committee doesn't come up with anything, and say the process or everyone's somewhat happy with it, it's good to check ourselves every few years and just hear from stakeholders and hear from board members. What are our needs? What do board members feel they're lacking in resources, or how they feel the process should be improved? And it's just I think a good venue to have that discussion, if nothing else.
Would this be something that both boards would be interested in doing, or just the Board of Fisheries? Mr. Hayward, don't we look at that every so often when we have joint board meetings, or the efficacy of the boards and how to improve them? Haven't we done that in the past?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Jensen. I said, in my experience, the joint board meetings is just the two, and it seems like it's driven a lot by what proposals come through the door, and it's more reactive. But it is a venue where you create your regulatory process, but the one you have is really simple. It's just that one six section reg site, so there's not a whole lot. I'm pretty confident the Board of Game would be very curious to see what you all come up with. And I don't know if you want to involve them at this stage, or because you do have your one committee with Board of Game committee that has met on occasion. I don't know if you want to work that in somehow, but could see how this progresses.
Yeah, I concur with that thought.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts is I would prefer to I think that, managing process discussions is challenging enough with, 7 people, let alone doubling the size of that. I think if we had our sort of own internal Board of Fish member discussion on process, and, obviously publicly, but if we talked about it sort of amongst ourselves and then shared if we had any recommendations or observations with the Board of Game, I mean, we can certainly do something like that going forward. But I think that it's always good to sort of pause and take the time to evaluate what's working, what isn't. Are there improvements that could be made, changes that could be made, and this might be an opportunity to do so. Commissioner, I see you're interested in speaking.
Yeah, so this is very timely, and I support the creation of this group. As Commissioner, I've been asked to examine our budget closely. We're having to make recommendations. You know, you're mostly funded with general fund money, and as such, there's a keen eye looking for cost efficiencies. And as Commissioner, I'm forced to identify those in terms of talks with OMB and a variety of other groups. So I think this is opportune time. I would rather not make some of these decisions in a vacuum, and I welcome your input and insights as to how we can have a more efficient process in the current budget climate, but that also meets your needs and the needs of the public. Again, I fully support an AC system that allows input into the process, and a board process that has meetings and throughout Alaska that gets those inputs, but those are costly meetings to have and costly processes. So the ways we can streamline that and make it more efficient, I'm more than welcome to entertain those discussions with you as board members. So I think this is a great time. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a better recommendation for the commissioner. You go to the Board of Game, you have them build all the better efficiencies and best practices, and let the Board of Fish just steal those ideas, okay?
Well, I think they question the need of having the committee of the whole on the Board of Fish side.
Yeah, can you clarify for me, Commissioner? You said the Board of Fish is primarily funded through the general fund, but isn't everybody, because there's no dedicated funds? Are you talking about federal revenue going to other parts of Fish and Game Department?
Actually, there are dedicated funds in Fish and Game. It's one of the few it's probably the only agency that has dedicated funds from the sale of sport fishing licenses. So yeah, okay. That's unique to Alaska.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying
the agency in general has we're about a $200 million enterprise, and about 55 million is general funds. The rest of it's all federal funds or Fish and Game Fund or a variety of other special funding sources. So.
Thank you for clarifying that. I also think this is a very good idea as far as creating a committee. It makes sense, and for an ongoing standing capacity committee kind of to review. I think my only concern moving forward is to the point of having so many committees that this becomes a full part-time job for whoever the Board of Fish members are, because if this works as planned, it should build out better efficiencies, and maybe we cut a day or two off on various meetings and build efficiencies in other places. So this totally makes sense here. I just get concerned at some point you have a whole bunch of committees that either do too much and it's too demanding on board members, or they're committees in name only and they don't do anything. So this is not one of those, in my opinion. So I support this one.
Thanks. I would, to the commissioner's point also, you'll note that the work of the committee, special committee in the charge document is to be completed by September 30th, 2021. And I think that was in purposeful date selection to provide or to have recommendations ready prior to the board's October work session for, additional discussion. So, and certainly if there are any recommendations to the department as they are going through their budget process, try to be mindful or thoughtful about when we will have our work completed for this committee.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Wood.
What prompted my interest in doing this committee was my experience this past session during the cycle. And I served on a lot of boards and commissions, et cetera, over the years. And there just seemed to be a lot of dead time and a lot of repetition that was not productive. And that's what it was initially geared towards. They should go through and take a look at how we do business. There's a better mousetrap out there. And I'm hoping that this committee can think outside the box if necessary and come up with some specific suggestions that will go through the public process and go through board approval. And if implemented, will result, as Board Member Godfrey pointed out, in efficiency that will result in less time, et cetera, necessary to do the people's business. And I just want to thank Glenn. He's the one that put this charge document together, as well as the next one on short order, and it's very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Additional board discussion or comments? Thoughts? All right, so I think I'd like to talk about assignments before we make a motion to adopt and formally approve this special committee. There seems to be a lot of interest. I guess we could do this a few different ways. I have all of the board members up here. If you have an interest in participating or serving on this committee, can you just kind of raise your hand? I mean, if there's enough interest, we could make the full board part of this. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So Israel, myself, John Wood, and John Jensen. Okay.
And of
Madam
course,
Chair.
Madam Chair, we'll chair this with Glenn Haight helping you navigate this. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I just one thing, and as we were looking at this, the NACNIC committee, I realized that we had actually put the actual members of the committee on that document. Perhaps if it's okay, I can add these the 4 of you onto this one before it gets signed, if that's all right, as an edit.
I think that makes good sense.
Okay, and depending on what we do with the next one, I can do the same with that as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jensen.
Yeah, when and if we do have our meetings, it would be probably really a good idea to have somebody like our commissioner sit in with us too, because he's the one that has to find the money. So it'd be good to have his input.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think it'd be great to have the commissioner's input and also board support, present, since they have certainly a lot more knowledge than I do about how this works. I have 1 year of experience under my belt, but I agree with Mr. Wood that there was some times where I felt like there could be, again, better, perhaps more efficient ways of doing things. So given that, I would entertain a motion to form the special committee to review board process with the members to be myself, John Wood, John Jensen, and Israel Payton.
So moved.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Any opposition? Hearing none, so moved. And this would be 2020, maybe 300 FB?
Yes, it will be. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Very good. Turning to the draft charge statement for research and funding. This is RC 23. I'd like to have a similar discussion on this proposal or this proposed committee, and do a similar method for committee assignments if we choose to go forward. So Mr. Haight, do you want to explain what you got in here, and then we'll open it up, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It is pretty brief. I'm not exactly sure how the best way to approach this one. Probably a series of meetings, but it would just if this captures Mr. Wood's thoughts, it would form a special committee to review fisheries research needs and funding sources. Suspect that there would be a number of meetings with research agencies, with the general public. And at some point, I imagine the committee is going to develop a laundry list of targeted research concepts and potential funding sources.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Mitchell.
I support this notion, and I also think that it would be important to be able to work with the department and various area managers across the state to really help identify the areas of research that need to be taking place. But I do support this, and I would be interested in being involved with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair. So I support the conceptual idea of it, because when I first got on the board, it seems like there is a gap to me between kind of what the public maybe needs or doesn't even know what they need for research, and the board and the Fish and Game. And I looked into it and basically found out, the Fish and Game, how they go through their projects and prioritizing the budget. And it's pretty complicated. This looks to maybe get involved in that. And speaking to Member Godfrey's, previous statement on, special committees, this is adding some more workload. And I can tell you right now, everyone everywhere is going to want more money and more funding. It's as simple as that. So to have a committee to go around and see the gaps, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be in support of forming this committee.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Godfrey.
Yeah, in my last comments on the last committee charge, I was foreshadowing to this one, and I think Mr. Payton caught that. While I do agree the need is there and the gaps exist, I will candidly tell you, and if the board adopts this committee, I hope to be proven wrong, but I believe this will be a committee that exercises nothing but futility. And I have no interest in being on it if the board adopts it. It lacks authority, and to Mr. Payton's point, everybody wants more money. And I don't think because the Board of Fish is going to identify a gap, that gap hasn't been identified by other stakeholders that are seeking money as well. So I don't see this committee producing any fruits over the next number of years if the board adopts it. And I just think, well, I think it's well intended. I just don't think that this is the vehicle to get us there. And I don't really think that the board has the authority to create a vehicle to get us there. And I just think this is one of those gaps that's always going to exist. So I won't be supportive.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might, I think the concerns expressed by Mr. Payton and Godfrey are valid and should be taken into consideration, but the political process does allow some input here. Obviously, the budget for the Fish and Game is going to be decided by Doug Vincent Lang and his submissions to the administration, and that will not change if this is adopted. What this will do is give us an avenue to identify what we feel or we're lacking in doing our job and putting it forward to the legislature for their use. If they decide that it has validity, they have the ability to find funding from places outside of the Fish and Game budget. And I speak from experience. I was very involved in putting together the Fish and Game budget in the Senate several years ago and understand where money sources are or aren't to be found. That's not the function of this committee. This committee is to identify what we're lacking and would like to have to do our job. And I don't see it as an act of utility. And yes, I'd be willing to serve on it and think it'd bring a added benefit to everyone involved. And I would urge support.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jensen.
I concur with Mr. Wood. I think it's a worthy endeavor, and I'll be supporting it based on Mr. Wood's explanation.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Mitchell.
I just want to follow up with that, and perhaps Aaron can speak to this on the legal side of it and the authority that the board has to do something like this. But realizing that the budget flag has been pulled several times throughout this work session, and the restrictions and limitations of the department to be able to conduct and I guess support their fishery management in some ways. And I feel like it would be important. And of course, I would want to make sure that we're within our authority to do something like this, but finding avenues to be able to support much needed research and to be able to support the efforts of managing fisheries in the state is important.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Director Rutz.
We do prioritize at least our sport fish projects every year, and I'm sure Sam Raybong does the same thing. And our projects, our priorities are based on public input and concerns. And, obviously, this has been a hard year for us. We lost about $8 or $9 million in revenues from out-of-state licensing. And so, we once again had to reprioritize our projects and figure out where we could make cuts and that kind of thing. But rest assured, public input is is how we prioritize our projects, the need.
Thank you for that, Director Rutz.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Raybon.
Well, since Director Rutz spoke up, thank you. Division of Commercial Fisheries approaches its budgeting in a little bit different manner. In the last 6 years, we've lost about 45% of our project funding. And what we do now is we prioritize our projects, our assessment projects that have as to direct nexus with management needs. These are in-season tools that our managers need to manage the fishery sustainably. The process has been the request comes to have us provide scenarios to reduce our budget by some amount, 5%, 10%, 50%, whatever it is each year. And so our process is to look at the value of the fisheries and the number of participants affected by that and try to minimize the negative effects on fisheries through the reduction. So the nexus is with minimizing the negative effect on the fisheries economy of the state. So it's a little bit unfair to the important fisheries that have low economic value, but that's the metric that we use. And we've been going down that road now for 6 years, going on 7 now. And we're kind of in triage. It's not like we have the ability or the discretion to add back in projects that we would like to do. What we're doing is minimizing the pain to the economy, because if we don't have the assessment tool, then we're forced to manage more conservatively, or in some cases even close fisheries. Because we don't have the assessment tools, we can't say we're managing sustainably. So that's where we're at. I just thought I'd paint a little different picture than Director Rutz. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Raybon, for your comments. And, from my perspective, certainly, I fully recognize the position that the department is in, that the state is in terms of budgetary constraints, the things and topics and that the legislature is going to have to wrestle with. And I think that the discussion of this committee, to be clear, is by no means critical of how the department has chosen to prioritize its budgets. I think for my purpose and my intent, with respect, the board has a very different perspective than the managers and then the department. And in the way that we do our work, you guys are nothing short of really helpful and amazing, and in helping us to understand the work that you do and in the regulatory process. But I do think that there's value in sort of taking some time to think about what makes our work as the Board of Fisheries better. What are we lacking? And recognizing that the board has no authority, but to just perhaps identify some of these areas that might make this board or future boards function better, or help inform regulatory decisions that might be made in the future better. So I guess that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at this through. And I just want to underscore that it's by no means, to my mind, any type of comment or criticism of how the department manages its way through the very, very difficult budget decisions that you have in front of you.
So, Madam Chair, maybe I could speak here for a second. I certainly don't, if you create a committee, we certainly don't view it as a threat to anything we're doing. I think, as a matter of fact, right now, when we go attend board meetings, we listen to your concerns about the quality of the research on the proposals that you're facing. And I can tell you, we factor that in as we're making budget decisions annually.
Commissioner, you cut out.
Of how we prioritize. And so, yeah, I guess we factor that in. So if you want to develop an official board board proposals, a board committee. We'll listen to it. We'll factor it in as we're doing, but either way, we'll make it work because we certainly value your input as decision makers on regulations on what's important to you in terms of how fisheries are managed and the research. Whatever you want to do, we'll be there for helping you.
Appreciate those comments.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to say a word, gonna piggyback on what the commissioner said, and that the Fish and Game, in my experience, has taken input on prioritizing funding, what they've heard through the board process and through stakeholders. I can think of a few very specific instances where, you know, a weir project was going away, and, you know, through the board process, through stakeholders coming to board members and board members going to the department and having a dialogue at a meeting, and you know, realizing it was a priority, that you know, they found funding for it. So the department has been very you know, active and willing to listen to the board and stakeholders, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I might speak just to a little bit here, just to build on what Israel board member Peyton said. You know, you guys create management plans, and those management plans a lot of times drive our research projects. And so you do, you know, the board does have the ability to drive a lot of our research projects. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as well.
Thank you. Additional discussion.
Awful question if there's nothing further to be discussed.
Thank you. So the question has been called. And the question would be whether or not the board should form a special committee to review fisheries research needs and funding sources, which if passed would be 2020-301 FB.
And Madam Chair, if I may ask, I may have not been taking the best notes. I noted that Mr. Wood and Ms. Mitchell were interested in serving. Was there another board member that would wish to? I mean, 2 is fine, but.
I would be interested.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks. So is there a motion?
We'll move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Haight, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Payton.
No.
Mr. Godfrey.
No.
Ms. Carlson Van Dort.
Yes.
Mr. Jensen.
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
That committee carries 5-2, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And so for clarity, that would be comprised of Mr. Wood, Ms. Mitchell, and Mr. Williams.
That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Always good to have a little split vote right on the end. Huh?
Yeah, always interesting, right? So that brings us to the end of the miscellaneous business agenda. Is there anything else to come before the board before we adjourn?
Just an observation, Madam Chair. Having gone through this Zoom meeting where I earlier assumed it would not work in a regulatory setting, I am now firmly convinced that this format would not work in a regulatory setting, so that should the question come up in anybody's mind about deciding to move in this direction, you can count on a no vote here. And it's not a reflection of how this Zoom meeting ran, because it ran very smoothly. It's just not made for that setting.
Thanks, John.
Mr. Woods.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my observation in that space is that, you know, I think for administrative work and things like that, I think it's doable. I have been thinking over the last day and a half, though, about, you know, how difficult it would be to have, you know, conversations, how difficult it is even for us to have conversations or to be communicating. and certainly getting stakeholder input would be challenging with this format. So I don't disagree at all. Anything else?
Madam Chair, you did a great job. Congratulations as chair. And I don't think anybody could have done a better job on this platform for the first inaugural go around. So kudos to you and board support staff, Glenn and your team. You know, with minor glitches here and there, it went way better than I thought. That having been said, I'll still agree with Mr. Wood entirely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godfrey.
Yeah, to say the same, Madam Chair, that it went surprisingly smooth, and quite honestly, it's like, wow. Between breaks, I just go get my coffee in my kitchen, and that's pretty nice. But from what we're used to, not to say this can't happen moving forward and things change and augment, but in the short term, yeah, I just don't think it's an option for this year.
It definitely works better than Adobe Connect, which we were using on the North Council for the last 2 weeks. So yeah, it's a better format.
And this is Doug. I want to thank board support staff and Glenn specifically for putting this together. Again, I think it ran smoother than I thought it was going to run. And when you live in Zoom land, it's kind of a different world that we all live in, but it went really well. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, board support staff, and board members. Thank you for your tolerance in putting through this, and especially Mark for running a meeting new to Zoom the first time. You did a great job. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for your service to the state of Alaska's board members. We appreciate it. And we will hopefully convene again shortly with answers to your questions regarding the status of the board. We're working on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I would like to just echo my thanks to board support and all department staff who were with us the last day and a half and made it possible, and also to the public who hopefully has been listening or watching our discussions over the last day and a half. So appreciate all the work and thoughtfulness and trying to adapt to the world that we're in right now. So if we have no further comments or discussion, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 10:54 a.m.
Good job.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
There you have it. Great job.
Oh, we survived.